Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Yes, I see you cutie pies in my very exclusive subscriber club. In this video, I have decided to make 8 batches of donuts in the span of a week. Why? I don't know. But what I do know is that by the end of this video, we will have the tastiest base recipe for any donut. The goal for day 1 was to pick the best flour for the job, either all-purpose or bread flour. All-purpose is what I see being used on most recipes, which makes sense because it would produce a very soft, melt-in-the-mouth crumb. However, I owe bread flour my heart, and I'm a big fan of yeasted donuts that lean a little bit heavier towards the brioche side, and bread flour is the way to go for that. 2 tests wasn't enough to satisfy this 6-year-old scientist in me, so I also decided to try a warm milk versus scalded milk. Warm milk needs no explanation, however, scalded milk, on the other hand, is a little bit more out there. I feel like it's very common advice in baking circles to never boil your milk because it will turn bad, which is code for different. And overall, boiling it does decrease the nutritional value. But we are here to make donuts, so who cares about nutritional value, am I right? One of the very many things that milk loses when you boil it is whey protein. Whey protein. Whey? No. Whey. Which can weaken gluten and prevent it from forming. Scalding the milk will switch off this protein, which is exactly what we want. My initial thoughts on this was that scalded milk combined with bread flour would get the best of both worlds, structure and rise from the bread flour, and a tender crumb thanks to the scalded milk. So, in order to save money, my waste, and my sanity, I had tweaked my base recipe to only make 4 donuts and made 4 batches of it. AP flour and warm milk, AP flour and scalded milk, bread flour and warm milk, and finally bread flour and scalded milk. There wasn't any noticeable difference between the doughs when I was kneading them, and they all rose at pretty much an even pace. While I was juggling proofing times, I decided to also make some strawberry icing. Pink donuts with rainbow sprinkles are superior to all others. Your opinion is irrelevant, you are wrong, and I am right. Deal with it. I thought it would be fun to make it with freeze-dried strawberries since they have quite a different flavor profile than their fresh counterparts. But spoiler alert, although it was very tasty, it was also kind of overwhelming. I wonder if maybe the freeze-dried strawberry powder could be used as more as a flavor booster for fresh berries instead of just like the main ingredient. I also took the opportunity to test out different donut shaping techniques. The classic one being using a cookie cutter, which gives you the perfect donut. However, I've never been a huge fan of that technique because of all the waste that comes along with it. I also tried to punch the hole before the final proof with some of them and after proofing with others. And of course, we are saving the donut holes. If you throw those in the trash, you're a heartless monster, okay? Hashtag justice for holes. Fun fact, when the donuts were almost ready to fry, I realized that I didn't have enough oil, so I tried to drive to the store, but my car, her name is Bubbles, didn't start because, you know, Midwest winters are not for the faint of heart. Alex and my sister were both still at work, and the donuts were turning into a ticking time bomb, so I put them in the fridge and I walked to the store. Yes, I walked. Can you believe that? In the US of A? Unheard of. There is a grocery store like 2 streets away from my house, so it really wasn't that dramatic, but it felt dramatic. And I mean, aren't you so proud of how brave I was when I left my house? Aren't you impressed with how committed I am to making this video? Yeah? Man, then I think you might have to subscribe. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Anyway, I got the oil, got back with a runny nose because ew, I was outside, and got to frying like nothing ever happened. In my very frazzled state, I decided to use a tiny pot for frying because I didn't think I had a bigger one that worked with my induction stove, which is a lie. I do have a bigger pot, so I guess that was just a brain fart. I struggled a little bit with oil temperature, which is why the donuts got a little bit more toasty than I wanted them to, but oh well, we're doing 6-year-old science here, not big boy science, okay? Now, the results for this first batch of tests was actually quite surprising. Both of the batches using scalded milk were worse than their counterparts, mostly texture-wise. And bread flour with warm milk was the most tender out of all of them, by far, which I also thought was pretty surprising. For day 2, it was time to get a little bit fancier with the tests. With the tried and true bread flour and warm milk as a base, I tried to test a few different ingredients: milk powder, glutinous rice flour, potato flakes, and finally, sweetened condensed milk. I was feeling a little sore at this point, so I enlisted the help of my KitchenAid, which I was very happy about. Her bowl was a little dusty, but just because she can't handle regular sized doughs doesn't mean that she can't work with tiny batches. I am very proud of her. Now please enjoy my incredible, awe-inspiring multitasking. As always, it is important to clean as you go. This was especially true for me because I was working on this big project and my meds were already going at 110%. Gotta keep everything clean to keep the stress levels low, you know what I mean? So here are the 4 doughs after proofing. They all look very beautiful and puffy and fluffy and nice, except for Mrs. Sweet Milk. My guess is that the extra sugar from the condensed milk really weighed down the yeast. I ended up having to put it in the fridge overnight because it was taking too long to proof, and full disclosure, I forgot about it. So we will never know if batch number 8, codename Mrs. Sweet Milk, would have gone on to become the tastiest donut of them all. But I don't really care, so neither should you. Moving on. This time I shaped the donuts into individual 60-gram balls and squished them flat before proofing them. After they doubled in size, I attempted to degas one of them to make it flatter, but that didn't make a positive difference, so don't do that. And then I punched holes into all of them before frying. Overall, if you're someone who doesn't want to deal with cookie cutters, scraps, re-rolling dough, and any of that, this technique might be worth your time. The donuts looked pretty good and had so much height to them. And now for the taste test. And the other one has regular sugar on the outside.
But this one's cinnamon and sugar.
Milk. That's really nice.
No, it's just very, like, I don't know what I'm looking for. It's just
this can be the baseline.
It's just a very good donut. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it tastes like mashed potatoes.
Wow.
But you weren't wrong.
That's fluffy.
Yeah.
That's legit like a pillow.
Yeah.
And I love the way that it looks on the inside too.
Yeah. It's not too dense.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because we just came from that other one, but to me this one's the most dense one.
Really?
Yeah,
the crumb of this one is tighter.
Okay.
Tighter.
I don't know any of the technical words.
Yeah.
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 And that's potato flour?
Not flour, potato flakes.
Flakes.
Literally the stuff that you make mashed potatoes out of.
Okay, so yeah, I love me a good mashed potato donut.
Honestly? Yeah. I think potato flakes win.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Nice. We're narrowing it down.
One day it's gonna be the perfect donut. You're just gonna make one.
One day it's gonna be next week because I'm not gonna stop doing tests until I'm done.
One of these days.
Potato flakes was the clear winner of this test. It's a very common ingredient in donut recipes and I can clearly see why. It was kind of shocking how soft and pillowy the donut was, so the choice was easy. And finally, it's time to attempt the final recipe. So please allow me to show you how to blow people away. In a bowl, we're going to mix 90 grams of beaten egg, room temperature is best, and 75 grams of brown sugar. Whisk that until the sugar is fully dissolved, and then we're going to add 15 grams of rum and 1 teaspoon of vanilla paste. And now for the dry ingredients. We're using 600 grams of bread flour, and because I am using instant yeast, 10 grams to be exact, I'm just pouring it into the flour and whisking it in. If you're using active dry yeast, you need to bloom it in the warm milk, and just make sure that it's no hotter than 110 degrees Fahrenheit, otherwise your yeast will wither away and die. In your stand mixer, pour in 375 grams of milk, your egg mixture, the flour, 50 grams of potato flakes, and 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Knead that until it passes the window pane test, and then add in your butter a little bit at a time, waiting for it to get absorbed into the dough before adding more. Once you're done incorporating all the butter and the dough is nice and smooth, transfer it to your work surface and knead it a little bit by hand just to make sure that it feels good and everything is swell before rounding it out into a ball. And look at how pretty she is. I love using vanilla paste because you can literally see the little vanilla specks in the actual dough, and that just makes me really happy. Put the dough in a bowl and leave it to proof until it's doubled in size. This will depend on your dough and room temperature as well as your yeast activity. I'm only using a little bit over 1.5% of yeast in this dough, and at 69 degrees Fahrenheit this dough proofed for a little bit over 2 hours before being ready. If you were at say 75 degrees Fahrenheit, I would estimate that it wouldn't take much longer than an hour to proof. Once it is looking like a 3-week-old kitten after eating, aka plump and round, plop your dough onto a nicely floured surface and begin pressing it down and degassing it. This next step will depend on how you want to shape them, but the technique I liked the most out of all of them was cutting them with cookie cutters and then letting them proof before punching the hole in the middle. I like to roll the dough out until it's about 1/2 inch thick and then use a cookie cutter that is about 3.5 inches in diameter. That's for the actual donut, and a cookie cutter that is smaller than 1.5 inches in diameter for the hole. Transfer the donuts onto a lightly floured tray lined with parchment paper and cover them to prevent them from drying. For whatever reason, I didn't record this part, but with the scraps from the first set of donuts that you made, dust as much flour off as possible, knead it to bring it back together, and roll it out before cutting again. I don't like doing a third roll, so I made 2 donut balls instead. That way I didn't get any dough wastage. This is what my donuts looked like after about an hour at 69 degrees Fahrenheit. They have puffed up nicely, but they're not quite there yet, which is the perfect time to start heating up your oil. Don't wait until the donuts are ready in order to get your oil ready, because they might overproof while you wait for the oil to come up to temperature. If you're struggling with the timings and are afraid that the donuts will overproof, you can always put them in the fridge to slow down fermentation. Thankfully, by now I remember that my big pot exists, so I use that for frying. I tried to keep the oil between 340 and 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which would have been a lot easier if I had one of those frying thermometers that you can clip onto your pot, but that's okay. We like a challenge. Back when I was in high school, I ran a fairly successful donut business off of Facebook, making Berlinas, aka German donuts, and delivering them to people's homes. I don't know how I didn't get murdered. Don't ask me about it. So I do have a teeny tiny amount of experience with this stuff, which is why I didn't feel the need to experiment with different flavorings, as I always do the same ones. I wish I could give you timings for how long to fry them and for when to flip them, but honestly, I completely forgot to time any of this. At this point, I do it purely by instinct, but as long as you have your temperature in the correct range, you are safe to guide yourself by the color of the donuts without fear of the inside being raw. Don't forget your little donut holes. And now it's time to decorate. Personally, I am very simple. These donuts are so tasty that I like having them with just plain sugar as a coating, but I was bringing these to a family birthday, so I decided to make 2 extra flavors. The first one is, once again, strawberry, but this time I used fresh ones instead of freeze-dried ones. I pureed them and strained out the seeds. Added a little bit of lemon, a pinch of salt, a splash of milk, and an avalanche of powdered sugar. The flavor was impeccable. However, I did mess up the texture a little bit. The icing was a tad on the runnier side, but delicious nonetheless. I'm trying not to beat myself up about it, okay? Make sure you quickly put on the sprinkles before the icing dries up. And next up is the chocolate frosting. I used powdered sugar, Dutch processed cocoa powder, salt, vanilla paste, melted butter, and milk as the main liquid. I don't love the look of donuts that use frosting instead of icing, but my god, this was divine. So delicious. 10 out of 10, could eat it with a spoon. That's delicious. And just like that, the donuts are done, decorated, and it's time to bake them. I am very, very proud of how these turned out, and I can confidently say that they are some of the best donuts I have ever had. And I used to work at the most popular donut shop in town. So here's the secret. 99% of donut shops, even those that are family owned, buy most of their stuff pre-made, from fillings and icings to the actual dough mix that they use for the donuts. And don't get me wrong, these are and can be extremely tasty, but they are not the best. And I think it's important to remind ourselves of what real food tastes like. And I don't say real in a alt-right, stay-at-home mom who homeschools her kids and doesn't vaccinate them type of way, but in a way that food made from scratch with real ingredients simply tastes different, better in my opinion, than anything store-bought. And these donuts are the perfect example of that in my mind. They don't literally melt in the mouth like Krispy Kreme donuts do, but that's because donuts aren't supposed to do that. Hot take, but yeasted donuts are bread, highly enriched, but bread bread nonetheless. They have structure, depth of flavor, a little bit of chew, and at the same time, they're soft and pillowy and fluffy like nothing else. I hope you guys enjoyed the video because I certainly enjoyed making it, and that you hopefully learned something from it and give this recipe a try. I promise it will not disappoint. Don't forget to like, dislike, comment, share, sub, and all that jazz, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!